Hello, everybody. On 30 April 2024, an F-16 was lost when an engine problem caused the pilot to eject. Pilot ejected safely. The AIB report is out. This is the report. We're going to go over the executive summary and then break down kind of what happened and what the board felt that was the reason for the mishap.
3, 2, 1, flight off.
On 30 April 2024, at approximately 11:44 local time day sortie, F-16 tail 870358, which means in 1987 or FY fiscal year 87, this tail was funded to be built, so roughly made in 1987. It crashed 6.5 nautical miles southwest of departure of Holloman runway 25. Planned and authorized basic surface attack, which is Navy calls it circle the wagons, Air Force bombing for quarters. Basically, you're in a container or a box pattern, and you're just practicing doing visual deliveries. Typically, I know the newer syllabi or syllabuses say that some of it is LGBs and stuff, but I think basic surface attack is just for ship doing the container pattern, practicing visual deliveries. I don't know if they had blue bombs, so BDU-33s on their aircraft. It does not say whether this aircraft had it or not, because when they talk about jettisoning stores, they're just talking about the single centerline fuel tank, which we'll talk about in a minute. It was a beautiful day with light winds. Mishap pilot initiated corrective actions after a loss of thrust at 1,000 feet AGL and ejected 1 minute and 18 seconds after the engine loss of thrust. Shortly after the ejection, the Mishap aircraft was destroyed for a total loss of $21 million, and the pilot sustained minor injuries and was luckily picked up by Army air helicopters who witnessed the whole thing minutes later. No relevant aircrew discrepancies or maintenance write-ups on the aircraft when flown the day of or day prior. Normal pre-launch and launch procedures occurred. Local maintenance seemed to be okay. Were conducted following applicable guidance. However, local maintainers cannot access or inspect the 5th stage of the engine, which will be the problem. The pilot was current qualified, medically fit. The board president found that the cause of the mishap was a misaligned return number 10 position variable stator vane with the 5th stage of the mishap aircraft engine. Over time, airflow disturbance passing through the turned 5th stage vane caused high cycle fatigue of that 5th stage compressor blade, eventually separated during flight, causing catastrophic engine damage, loss of thrust, and we don't know why that there was a turn vane, although we have some good ideas, and we'll talk about that here in a second. All right, that's the summary. Let's break down the report. So we talked about the summary. It was basically right after takeoff, 36 seconds after takeoff, experienced engine loss of thrust at 1,000 feet, initiated corrective action, but due to low altitude, decreasing airspeed, they ejected. So it's an F-16C. I don't know if it's block 25 or 32. It says it's got a Pratt 220, which leads me to believe it's either a 20. It's probably a 25, but it could be a 42. But it seems like pretty old to be a 42. I think the 42s are a little bit newer than 87. 87 to me sounds like a block 25, but I don't know for sure. But this is the Pratt motor that powers the F-16 in question. So it was not a GE engine. As far as the sequence of events, Mishap pilot was part of a 4-ship of 2 single-seat F-16s and 2 2-seat D models, family models. The formation was conducted as part of the formal training unit syllabus. So Holloman is a schoolhouse for the F-16. They teach young fighter pilots how to fly the mighty Viper, and it was just a local BSA training sortie. Standard procedures were used for formation planning. The number 1 aircraft was the IP and the family model. Number 2 was a student. Number 3 was the mishap pilot, also an instructor pilot, and number 4 was a student. There was an additional pilot in the rear seat of number 1. Prior to the flight, the mishap pilot and other pilots in the formation attended a mass briefing given by the op soup or top 3, which consists of weather notice, airmen, and aircraft configuration, other pertinent data. This must be a B course thing. Typically, the top 3 just gives you your step brief. I've never known the top 3 to give a mass brief prior to your brief, but that must be like their B course thing or something. I don't know. I don't ever remember this being a part of anything. Typically, it's just mass brief with other formations, your 4-ship, and then maybe your element, and then you get a step brief. So, but not causal, not relevant, just making a comment. So they had the top three mass brief, then they briefed their own formation, and then they had their step brief before leaving for the aircraft, which is standard. It was changed due to airspace constraints, so they were kind of pushing their timeline a little bit, but it's not relevant. The Mishap aircraft was called the B-00, which is a single 300-gallon external fuel tank. So they must have been doing simulated weapons deliveries to not have the BDU-33 Blue Death on TERS. Everything was conducted by the launching crew chief routinely for pre-launch and launch. While holding short, they had some radio issues, and they had to troubleshoot that. But that caused a delay, but wasn't relevant to the flight. The mishap itself, the takeoff was at 11:42. Each aircraft in the formation performed a max AB takeoff, 15-second spacing between them. Standard. Came out of AB just before 300 knots, continued accelerating during his departure. And when he came out of AB, that's when he felt the loss of thrust, loud bang, felt the loss of thrust, violent shaking, engine vibration. So he immediately rolled out of his left turn to maintain aircraft control and analyze the situation. When he heard the bang, he felt the shaking and began his rollout. He was at 1,000 feet, 329 knots, 1 mile from the departure end of the runway on a mag heading of 247. Recorded engine data showed the subsequently rapidly decreasing RPM and failure of engine to respond to movement. So that's pretty textbook. A civilian witness saw the orange fire burst, came out of the back. Same thing with the helicopter and number 4. They all saw it, which is consistent with a compressor stall. When I had my compressor stall, the RSU on the ground said, hey, it looks like an orange flame came out the back, because that's what happened. That's just what it looks like when you have a compressor stall. The CSMU crash survivable memory unit registered engine stall at 11:43:09, followed by stagnation. Engine decayed to below 60% within 5 seconds. Once that's below 60%, the engine is fully stagnated. Any attempt to restart are accomplished through a more time demanding, usually fire fodder frozen. It's probably not going to restart. So now it says basically prioritize pre-ejection preparation. So critical action procedures, boldface, if I remember correctly, zoom, stores, jet, eject. Zoom the aircraft. You're trading airspeed for altitude because you want to get into a better ejection envelope. You want to get into a better ejection parameter. Slowing down higher up is good for you. Jettison. If you got any stores, you want to jettison those. That removes weight and drag, which gives you a better zoom profile. And then eject, because you're not starting this engine. It's only got one engine. Give it back to the taxpayers. Due to altitude less than 2,000 feet, loud bang, heavy vibrations indicating engine damage, RPM less than 60%, flight manual directs prioritizing pre-ejection preparation over attempted restart. Also thrust low altitude pilots to trade available airspeed, zoom, for additional altitude. If the aircraft is not in position to land on a suitable runway, an ejection should be made, if possible, above 2,000 feet to increase the chance of success, right? You want to give that seat as much of an opportunity to save your life as possible, although it'll work. 0-0. You don't want to sink rate. You don't want to be in any kind of unusual attitude, and you don't want to be too low, because you want to give that seat enough time to give you enough swings in the chute to prevent injuries and prevent death. Using the term generally associated with aircrew to stop engagements, he called knock it off on radio 1, and then 4 closed in the chase. So his wingman closed the gap and started chasing him, and they stated over the radio, engine failure with immediate acknowledgement by the flight lead. He punched his tanks, his single centerline tank. So Dash 4 noted that, and they marked the position. Tower basically said, hey, okay, we know where it is. Because you have to mark where stuff happens, right? When stuff comes off the airplane. At that time, the flight lead began turning back towards the mishap pilot and Dash 4 to assume the primary chase responsibility, because he's the IP, and a student can do it, but it's better if 2 IPs are doing this, 2 instructor pilots. Tower acknowledged, and they said 3's going to punch, indicating he was preparing for ejection. 4 seconds later, mishap pilot ejected, and P4 observed the chute and reported good chute over the radio. The flight lead directed his wingman to follow him and sent 4 to go orbit over Holloman Air Force Base at higher altitude. ATC provided altitudes over Holloman, provided a communication relay with the Army helicopters. Within 5.5 minutes of ejection, a helicopter with a flight surgeon landed next to MP. If you're going to eject, you cannot ask for a better setup than that, to have 2 helicopters with a flight surgeon land and pick you up, bring you back to base within 5.5 minutes. I mean, thanks, Army. Much appreciated. So they looked at the parameters. They were 156 knots and 5,000 feet MSL, true heading of 228 when he ejected. That's where they ejected, and that's where they landed at White Sands National Park, 6.5 miles southwest of departure end. 500-foot debris field there. Pulled the ejection seat handle, and within milliseconds, the sequence worked as advertised. Due to the low altitude, slow airspeed, the ACES said, yep, we're in mode 1, which means the chute's going to deploy almost immediately. And that's what happened. However, the only thing that didn't work was the ANURT-46 radio beacon, the emergency locator transmitter, the ELT, didn't go off. Wasn't a factor, but I'm kind of like, hey, probably that should work. So 35 seconds after the ejection, the flight lead radioed tower saying my number 3 had to eject off the end of the runway. Within a minute, all 3 remaining formation aircraft were over the parachute impact site. So they had altitude deconfliction, so they were doing the right thing. 2 minutes later, they established comms with the 2 helicopters. Not too long after that, Mishap pilot was picked up by the helicopter. Flight surgeon exited, assessed, and he walked him to the helicopter. Textbook. I mean, if you got to eject, there you go. Thankfully, there's no recovery remains. This was a success story. And then within 20 minutes of ejection, look at that. Security Forces was on site. They were hauling the mail. So that's awesome. So Security Forces was there to secure the crash site, help protect the integrity of the crash site, and everything worked from a search and rescue perspective as well as you ever could hope. So they looked at maintenance, which I'm sure maintenance was sweating, right? Because they're like, oh God, what happened? Anybody's gonna be sweating when there's a mishap. But everything was complied with, 781s, time compliance technical orders. Nothing was wrong in the forms. Nothing was wrong in the inspections. It was nearing its next 100-hour inspection, but it had complied with all the different inspections. No reported discrepancies. All inspections complied with and approved TCTO or technical order guidance. They looked at maintenance, fuel, oil, hydraulic samples, oxygen. Everything was normal. Nothing seemed unnecessarily done or not done or complied with in the wrong way. Unscheduled maintenance, though. This is where we get into the, hey, what's going on? So while the engine was on a different aircraft, it had a foreign object debris damage incident in August of 2022. Remember, this happened in April of 2024. The damage from this event was limited to only the first stage of the inlet fan being 1 through 3 of the engine's 13 stages of compression. As required, repairs were made, limited to blending the first stage blade damage to within allowable limits. So they complied with that. Then they did an engine bore scope inspection where a camera was inserted in access ports to look for any nicks, cracks, or anything that might be wrong after it took foreign object damage. While completing the inlet fan's first stage FOD repair, they also did the 100, 200, and 400-hour bore scope inspection as required by the regulations. This was on 14 December 2022, so a little over a year and a half before the incident. No noted discrepancies in any of the bore scope inspectable stages. But due to the absence of an access port permitting a 5th stage bore scope inspection, the 5th stage is only inspected when it's taken to Tinker Air Force Base and they tear it down at the depot. So it has to be depot level maintenance. And had they found damage earlier, that would have required them to do that. But they didn't find any damage. It says a depot level inspection of the Mishap aircraft's engine 5th stage was not prescribed after the FOD event due to the absence of damage in the 2nd through 4th stage. So basically they're saying that they look at it, and if the earlier stages have damage, okay, we got to send this off to depot because there's probably damage beyond that we can't see with a bore scope. But because there was no damage there, the book doesn't say to send it off. So they stopped where they could, and the assumption was that the 5th stage had no damage, but they could not visually verify that with the bore scope. No engine unscheduled maintenance discrepancies since the FOD event repairs and inspections discussed in this section. They were all complied with. For the structure, no significant issues were noted for hydraulic, electrical, or fuel. They looked at the flight control system. The digital flight control computer program data suggests no control. So it must be a Block 42. I think digital would mean Block 42. So that must be what they're flying. After the unscheduled maintenance and borescope inspections in 2022 due to the first stage FOD, the aircraft engine spent 7 months in storage and was installed July of 2023 on the Mishap aircraft. So they fixed it, put it in storage. It sat there for 7 months, and then a year, 10 months prior to the mishap, the aircraft, the engine was installed in the Mishap aircraft. It then accumulated 70 hours of flight time, and it was 28 hours away from its next 100-hour borescope, which wouldn't have found this anyway because the fifth stage has no borescope way to look at it. It was last overhauled at 2016 where no defects were noted. Since then, it was 3,620 CCYs approaching its next scheduled depot overhaul. So it was getting there. It was getting close to needing to go back to depot, which they probably would have found this issue. AIB evaluated 3 engineering technical analysis report with engine-related information. All 3 identified the engine loss of thrust. 2 reports noted a separated fifth stage blade. Even Lockheed got involved. Following the loss of thrust, all Mishap aircraft systems responded as designed. A few minor exceptions noted in the Lockheed Martin report, none of which prevented the safety of flight. But they don't tell us what it is. They went to the Air Force Life Cycle Management at Tinker, and that's where they found no pre-impact damage forward to the fifth stage. Report concluded the single fifth stage blades separated, causing severe secondary damage to the other blades, which caused a disruption of airflow due to the separation. You can see that's what it looks like. There was a mark pattern that basically is how they got their data. It was 25 degrees open. Turn fifth stage vane produced abnormal aerodynamic forces resulting in high cycle fatigue and eventual separation. I mean, it's not designed to have that open that much. The debris from the separation causes significant airflow disruption, causing engine loss of thrust at 1,000 feet. Field level engine maintainer with 43 years of experience testified the turning of 1 out of the 62 fifth stage vanes could be from being misassembled at the depot. However, the depot engine professionals all testify regarding quality control processes, how a misaligned vane would result in the entire variable vane set binding during prescribed checks. So it's not likely that it was done inappropriately. While it had a FOD event, no evidence of pre-impact FOD was present in the Pratt & Whitney report, so I don't really know. Weather was beautiful. Crew qualifications. He was a freshly minted instructor pilot. He had 700 hours total time, and he'd just done his upgrade in February with a Q1 no hits. He had 6 hours in the last 30 days for 5 sorties, 24 hours in 19 days, or 19 sorties in the last 60 days, and then last 90 days, 33 hours and 26 sorties, which is crazy because when I was flying my butt off, I did like 27 BFM sorties in 1 month, but kids these days, they don't get that much flying. Medical, everybody was full up, no issues for the pilot. He did everything right. Supervision, same thing. Human factors, they really don't have any human factors to contribute. Did everything right. Actually did everything better than right because they picked him up so quickly. For the opinion of summary, preponderance of the evidence, mishap was the misaligned return number 10 position variable stator vane in the fifth stage, and subsequent breaking free of a fifth stage blade causing catastrophic engine damage. He interviewed a whole bunch of people and they all agreed. It was caused by a misaligned return vane in the Pratt & Whitney motor. Over time, this vane and the fifth stage caused high cycle fatigue and eventual separation. Separation caused further engine damage and disruption of airflow. Loss of thrust while the aircraft was at 1,000 feet, 329 knots. The only favorable outcome was to eject. He looks into the FOD stuff, and then following the tech order procedures, 15 first stage blades were repaired and inspected. All accessible stages, remember accessible, fifth stage is not accessible, of the engine were inspected. No damage was noted in the 2nd through 4th stages, nor the 6th through 13th stages. So there's just this one stage, and before it, no damage, after no damage, but they could not look at this one stage. But the assumption is if those are good, everything else is good. Fifth stage is not inspected other than during a depot level maintenance teardown, so it had to send it off. Field level maintenance correctly performed all required engine repairs. No field level indications would have triggered the removal of the engine for shipping to the depot for unscheduled maintenance at the fifth stage. So they wouldn't have looked at it because nothing says you need to. Pratt & Whitney said the probable sequence of events started with the 2022 FOD event, given no damage was noted on stages 2 through 4 after the FOD event. I inquired about the likelihood of damage to a later stage with no damage to a prior stage. Field level engineer with 43 years around this engine says it happens. It's kind of unexplainable. but it's frequent enough that we've all seen instances. A field-level engine and borescope instructor had never seen this. An experienced depot maintainer said it could happen, but it was very rare. Finally, a depot aerospace engineer said it would be surprising if it occurred. While historical instances and testimony suggest the possibility of the vane being turned during a FOD field event, I find no evidence that has happened. I mean, what else, though? I mean, while it's possible, it's not likely a single vane would be incorrectly assembled at the depot. All three interviewed depot professionals testified misaligned vane would cause the whole variable vane set to bind and not pass inspection. So it's not that it was installed wrong. They've seen instances where it's possible FOD caused this, but they're saying it's not probable. So he's basically saying, well, I just don't know. I find the cause for return vane impossible to determine. I don't know. I'm no engineer, but you had FOD. You didn't inspect this one section. The one section is a problem. It doesn't just happen magically. You had the dude with 43 years saying it's possible. It's unexplainable. I know legalese he can't, but the writing seems to be, hey, if they could have inspected this one section, they probably would have prevented this mishap. Find by preponderance of the evidence, the following factors substantially contributed to the mishap. Fifth stage of the Pratt 220 engine is not inspected except during an engine core and teardown at depot level maintenance. All 5 engine professionals I interviewed testified the inspection of the fifth stage occurs at depot level maintenance during an engine core and HPC teardown. An experienced depot maintainer theorized an extremely lengthy, unprescribed possibility of sneaking a borescope through individual openings in the fourth stage to inspect one of the fifth stage blades. Each instance will require withdrawing the borescope and sneaking it back through another opening while risking it breaking off inside the engine and causing additional damage. Therefore, it's not prescribed. Yeah, I mean, you're in, out, in, out. The known blind spot of not inspecting the fifth stage when field procedures do not indicate damage in adjacent stages requires deliberate risk assessment by the F-16 System Program Office. Risk assessment is based on historical and anticipated probability of damage before scheduled maintenance compared to the severity of possible adverse effects. This deliberate risk assessment is informed by the limited time, manpower, and funding. So we're just taking the risk. Performing unprescribed, unscheduled maintenance, even if out of an abundance of caution, would adversely affect the whole aircraft program and other programs. I mean, it would be costly and it would cause wider spread issues. However, it's likely this specific mishap might have been avoided if post-FOD event policy or general life cycle procedures prescribed a shorter deadline for the next depot level scheduled maintenance. I find by preponderance of the evidence, the aircraft mishap was caused by misaligned or turned number 10 vane. I also find the known limitation, the inability to borescope inspect the engine's fifth stage combined with only inspecting the fifth stage during an engine core or teardown substantially contributed to the aircraft mishap. And that is it. Sounds like it had FOD. One little, it's always that one little piece. And 9 times out of 10, you don't inspect that part because the other parts are good. It's probably good. And then this is the one time where probably wasn't good and it led to the ejection. Thankfully, pilot ejected safely, was relatively uninjured. Hope he gets his VA claim going, covers back and ankle injuries. Army was there to hook us up, pick it up with a flight surgeon. Can't ask for anything more than that. So glad that the outcome was good, but it's kind of crazy that, it kind of, we found a known blind spot. Now, granted, it's a known blind spot on a 1987 F-16. So hopefully the F-35 doesn't have this. And I'm sure the new, the GE motor, I don't know. Does the GE motor have the same issue? I don't know. I figured this was like a block 25, block 32. It could be a block 42. I don't know. But either way, they found an issue, and that's how mishaps work. You find something that no one's ever thought about, and now we're talking about it because, holy crap, it did become a mishap. But thankfully, nobody was injured on the ground. The pilot was safe. Processes worked to recover him safely. So let me know in the comments what you think. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time.